Imagine a world where the night sky is no longer dark, where the stars are blotted out by thousands of artificial satellites crisscrossing the heavens, where the thrill of innovation collides with the threat of chaos, and the fate of our planet's most valuable frontier is up for grabs. Who decides the rules for space, and what happens when nobody is really in charge? This is not science fiction. Right now, far above our heads, a new kind of gold rush is underway. In the past decade, SpaceX, Amazon, and Chinese tech giants have launched tens of thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit, creating a booming commercial ecosystem that powers everything from global internet to real-time weather tracking. But with every new launch, the risks grow: collisions, debris, interference, and a regulatory system struggling to keep up. For a moment, consider this unsettling reality. Our future, our security, our ability to explore the universe may depend on who writes and who enforces the rules of space. Today, we're diving into a high-stakes battle that will shape the next century, between nations, among companies, and across invisible borders above our world. Why are experts warning that space is becoming the Wild West? Why are leading scientists and policymakers racing to create new rules before disaster strikes? What's really at stake if we get this wrong? Let's explore the heart of a crisis that's unfolding, and why Colorado, of all places, may be where the future of space policy is decided. Space used to be the exclusive domain of astronauts, scientists, and a handful of superpowers. For most of human history, the sky was a mystery, a stage for myth and inspiration. Sputnik's beep, the moon landing's grainy footage, the Challenger's tragedy. These were moments that defined generations and drew a clear line between the realms of Earth and the unknown. But over the last 20 years, everything has changed. Reusable rockets, miniaturized satellites, and a wildfire of venture capital have transformed the space sector into a global marketplace. No longer does a state-owned behemoth like NASA or Roscosmos control the narrative. Instead, companies like SpaceX, Amazon's Project Kuiper, and China's Starnet are building mega-constellations, some boasting tens of thousands of satellites that promise to connect every corner of our planet. Business is booming. According to Morgan Stanley, the global space economy could top $1 trillion by 2040. Yet beneath the headlines, a quiet crisis is brewing. Low Earth orbit, an invisible ring just a few hundred kilometers above us, is getting crowded fast. As of early 2025, there are over 9,000 active satellites in orbit, with regulatory agencies like the US FCC facing a flood of more than 40 new constellation applications. These applications aren't for a handful of satellites, they're for tens of thousands each. Audrey Schaffer of the Aerospace Corporation sums up the problem. The lack of clear international norms for space operations creates uncertainty and increases the risk of miscalculation. The consequences are both immediate and long-term. In the short term, interference from satellite transmissions is making traditional radio astronomy nearly impossible in some parts of the world. Their metallic shells reflect sunlight, creating streaks in astronomical images and muddying the raw data that scientists depend on to explore the universe. It's not just science at stake. Every commercial launch leaves behind debris, everything from tiny flakes of paint to dead satellites the size of school buses. Each chunk, traveling at thousands of kilometers an hour, can turn into a bullet, threatening anything in its path. The worst-case scenario? The Kessler syndrome, a cascade of collisions that could render entire orbits unusable for centuries. As Daniel Baker, director of the new Colorado Space Policy Center, puts it, "It's a Wild West world out there in LEO. There's no real framework or governance nor rules. It's everybody for themselves." Why hasn't the world been able to agree on how to manage this mess? The story goes back to the 1960s, when the Outer Space Treaty was written by the United States and the Soviet Union. Back then, space was the playground of a handful of superpowers. The treaty banned nuclear weapons in orbit and insisted that space was the province of all mankind. But the treaty left unanswered a host of other issues. Who could own resources they mined? Who pays for damages? Who polices the traffic jams above Earth? The lines between civilian, commercial, and military uses blurred, and with every new technology came new questions. Today, the typical regulatory process is agonizingly slow. Daniel Baker laments, "The pace of advice needs to catch up with the pace of development. It's now completely out of whack to take months and years to formulate policy advice." Meanwhile, private enterprise races ahead. SpaceX launches more than 60 satellites per month. Startups in California, Florida, and even Colorado promise on-orbit servicing, asteroid mining, and debris collection, while Chinese, European, and Indian space agencies ramp up their own ambitions. The result? A system where nearly anyone with money and engineering skill can put objects into space, but few have the incentive, or even the tools, to clean up afterward. The stakes are getting higher. In 2024, the FAA proposed new rules for commercial launches, with a fresh focus on safety and environmental impact. The European Space Agency, alarmed by growing congestion, announced a landmark partnership with private firms to develop debris removal technologies. But the pace of launches keeps accelerating. The Artemis Accords, signed by 36 nations by March 2025, lay out principles for responsible exploration and use of the moon and beyond, but their terms are voluntary. The United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPUOS, is struggling to keep up, its guidelines lacking teeth in global enforcement. Meanwhile, the U.S. National Space Policy and National Space Council emphasize the critical role of commercial innovation, while also warning of security risks. The Aerospace Corporation's recent report warns, the increasing reliance on commercial space assets creates new vulnerabilities that need to be addressed through enhanced security measures. As Teresa Hitchens, defense policy expert, cautions, the increasing reliance on commercial space assets creates new vulnerabilities that need to be addressed through enhanced security measures. China is pressing ahead with its own independent debris and traffic monitoring system, making collaboration more complicated and the stakes even higher. Namrata Goswami, an independent analyst, notes, China's growing space capabilities are changing the geopolitical landscape and creating new challenges for U.S. space policy. All of these threads converge at the University of Colorado Boulder, where a new frontier in policymaking is taking shape. The Colorado Space Policy Center was born out of necessity, an answer to the mounting realization that academic research, government policymakers, commercial giants, and military strategists all need a place to analyze and debate the issues of this rapidly evolving domain. At its helm is Daniel Baker, a distinguished professor with a decades-long record in planetary and space physics. His mission is daunting: bring together the best minds from engineering, business, law, and the sciences to forge a new set of answers. The university is pouring in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, leveraging its location within America's densest aerospace ecosystem. Colorado is home to giants like Lockheed Martin and Ball Aerospace, nimble startups, and military research hubs. The center's agenda is as broad as it is urgent: unregulated use of low Earth orbit, planetary protection, human versus robotic exploration, the tangled relationship between security and civilian programs, and, above all, the need for a new global regulatory framework. As Baker explains, people need advice now, and all of these areas, I think, deserve a lot more attention. The CSPC sees itself as different, merging research, academic rigor, business, and real-world experience. Its goal? To graduate the next generation of leaders who see the big picture, not just the science and engineering, but the policy, economics, and law of space. But even as the center prepares to shape the future, the challenges it faces are daunting. What happens if the world fails to act? Experts warn of three major scenarios unfolding before our eyes. First, the tragedy of the commons. Without coordinated action, the unregulated boom in launches and satellites pushes low Earth orbit toward a tipping point. Collisions trigger more debris, and the Kessler syndrome turns LEO into an unusable junkyard. The consequences would ripple across the global economy, affecting everything from internet access to weather prediction and military operations. Second, the commercial gold rush. As private interests race to exploit lunar water, asteroid metals, and orbital real estate, property rights disputes and environmental damage could escalate. Without clear legal frameworks, conflicts could break out between companies and even nations. Third, the great power competition. With the line between commercial and military blurred, space becomes a new theater of rivalry. The race for dominance might lead to weaponization, cyber attacks on satellites, and new forms of geopolitical brinkmanship. There is a chilling sense of urgency. As Dr. Mariba Jha, space debris expert at the University of Texas, puts it, we need a global, transparent system for tracking and managing space objects to ensure the long-term sustainability of space. Yet even as new rules and partnerships are discussed, the parade of launches continues. Startups are incentivized to deploy quickly, often with little thought to long-term consequences. Regulatory agencies, international bodies, and companies are talking, but rarely moving as fast as the technology itself. So, will the world's efforts at policymaking catch up before the damage is done? Is it possible to harmonize interests between private, national, and international players when the incentives for rapid expansion are so strong? At this crossroads, the decisions we make, or fail to make, will define the next era of space exploration. And with centers like the CSPC just getting started, the real test is only beginning. But what would it take to avoid disaster? And is it already too late? In the next part, we'll peel back the competing interests driving this orbital arms race, the breakthrough ideas that could transform space policy, and the pivotal battles now playing out on the global stage. So, with the stakes in low Earth orbit growing by the day and the rulebook barely sketched, what does the future hold for humanity's newest frontier? Let's fast forward to what's at risk, what opportunities could still be seized, and what could happen if we ignore the warning signs spelled out by the world's leading space experts. Imagine the near future, just a few years from now. Dozens of companies are launching satellites every week. Mega-constellations fill the sky. There are 12, 20, maybe 60 competing for your global Wi-Fi signal, tracking ocean currents, monitoring crops, and turning the entire planet into a data-rich sphere. At night, the stars blur behind moving beads of artificial light. Radio telescopes, once our best hope for listening to the universe, are garbled by thousands of signals. For some, it's the dawn of a new technological renaissance. For others, it's a creeping tragedy, more silent than visible, but no less real. This is the scenario Dr. Daniel Baker calls the tragedy of the commons. When anyone can claim a patch of LEO, and responsibility is scattered, what's left is chaos. Debris fragments from collisions or abandoned satellites whirl around Earth at thousands of kilometers per hour. A single mistake can trigger the nightmare chain reaction known as Kessler syndrome. One collision creates fragments, which cause more collisions, cascading until entire orbits become impassable, locking out not just commercial dreams, but vital services like GPS, forecasting, disaster response, and even astronaut access to space. But let's pause. What if we learned from history? What if we acted? The next few years could go another way, a course charted not by panic, but by collective action and bold innovation. The commercial gold rush in space doesn't have to end in chaos. The Artemis Accords, now signed by 36 nations, show that agreements are possible, even if still imperfect. The European Space Agency's new alliances with private companies to actively remove debris prove that technology can be a solution, not just a source of problems. And the United Nations' ongoing efforts to set sustainability guidelines signal that, at least for some, stewardship is not an afterthought. But here's the twist. As space becomes more accessible, it's also becoming a new stage for national rivalry. The US, Europe, China, India, all are investing in their own satellite navigation systems, debris tracking networks, and, some fear, military posts above our heads. As Namrata Goswami, an independent analyst, warns, China's growing space capabilities are changing the geopolitical landscape and creating new challenges for U.S. space policy. What happens if space follows the path of the world's oceans, or cyberspace? Could we see a new Cold War, this time above the clouds? The risk is very real. Disconnected debris tracking systems, conflicting claims to orbits, the weaponizing of satellites, or even basic navigation signals. The line between civilian, commercial, and military activity is blurring faster than policymakers can sort out who's responsible for what. Yet within this complex, high-stakes contest, there's immense opportunity. Space does not have to be a battleground or a junkyard. The right policies at the right time, crafted with both ambition and humility, can turn the game around. Streamlining regulations is essential for fostering innovation and attracting investment, says George Whitesides of Virgin Galactic. If rules are clear and fair, more companies will build, invest, and dare. But for this to work, we need two things: transparency and global norms. Audrey Schaffer, a space security expert, puts it plainly. The lack of clear international norms for space operations creates uncertainty and increases the risk of miscalculation. In other words, if we can't agree on the basics, like how to avoid running into each other, who has to clean up their mess, and how to share key data, then small mistakes can quickly spiral into global disasters. This leads us back to the Colorado Space Policy Center and the role of research and education in shaping the future. It's not just another academic think tank. By drawing on engineers, scientists, business experts, and lawyers, it's building what Baker calls a bigger picture of the space field. Their mission? To create the brain trust for tomorrow's treaties, business plans, and maybe, just maybe, a new code of conduct for the age of orbital abundance. You might be wondering, what does all this mean for me? The answer is more personal than you think. Whether or not you ever leave the ground, your life increasingly depends on space, for the navigation in your car, the phone in your pocket, the climate data used to warn of floods or wildfires, the banking transactions that circle the globe at light speed. If we lose access to safe, reliable orbits, whole industries could collapse overnight. On the flip side, a well-governed space can unlock incredible benefits. Affordable global internet, precision farming to feed billions, real-time disaster warning, and the potential for entirely new industries like asteroid mining or lunar manufacturing. But the key to all of it? Trust. Trust that the skies will be safe, that the data will be secure, that the rules are known and fair to all. That's why the lessons of this space policy moment matter to everyone, not just rocket scientists or lawmakers in Washington. As Baker noted, if not us, who? If not here, where? And if not now, when? Here's how you can use what you've learned today. First, stay curious and informed. Space news isn't just for specialists anymore. When new regulations are proposed or international agreements signed, ask yourself, will this make the skies safer for everyone or just for a handful of companies? Push for transparency. Support media, institutions, and leaders who make complex issues accessible and who invite public input. The more people understand the stakes, the harder it is for decision makers to ignore the long-term risks. Second, support education and critical thinking, especially in science, engineering, law, and policy. The next generation of space leaders isn't just being trained in simulators or launch pads, it's happening in classrooms, universities, startups, and online. Advocate for programs like the Colorado Space Policy Center that blend technical know-how with big-picture thinking. Third, recognize your own power as a consumer, voter, or entrepreneur. When businesses and governments see that ordinary people care about responsible space use, whether that's through their purchases, their votes, or the startups they found, change follows. Encourage companies to design for debris, to participate in open tracking systems, and to be transparent about their environmental impacts. Finally, dream big, but act responsibly. The best futures are made not just by visionaries, but by communities who know how to balance freedom with responsibility. The Wild West model has its appeal, but we've seen time and again on Earth how unchecked exploitation leads to disaster. And now, the answer to our opening question. Can the world avoid a disaster in space when innovation moves faster than regulation? And is it already too late to act? Here's the truth. The window to act is still open, but it's closing fast. The sheer number of launches, the rise of new players, and the complexity of modern satellites mean each year brings more risk, but also more opportunity to get ahead of the problem. International cooperation is hard, but not impossible. Policies like the Artemis Accords, the new FAA regulations, and ESA's debris removal initiatives point the way. But these efforts need to be scaled up, and fast. As Dr. Mariba Jah puts it, we need a global, transparent system for tracking and managing space objects to ensure the long-term sustainability of space. Success will demand not just new technology, but new ways of building trust across borders, sectors, and cultures. And here's a secret fact few realize. The very satellites that could one day clutter our orbits are also the key to cleaning them up. Advances in autonomous robotics, machine learning, and precision-guided removal mean that, with the right incentives, private industry could profit from making space safer for all. Imagine a future where cleaning up the sky is as routine and profitable as launching into it. That's not science fiction. It's a policy decision in waiting. So, what future do you want to see? Will space become a junkyard, a cautionary tale for generations to come? Or will it be a model for global cooperation, innovation, and shared prosperity? You can make a difference by staying engaged, spreading knowledge, and demanding bold, clear, responsible policies. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden forces shaping our future, and let us know in the comments what excites or worries you most about humanity's next